My body went cold. The room, minutes before filled with a triumphant, exhausted joy, suddenly felt hollow, charged with an unnatural stillness. My son came out and he was dark-skinned. A rich, deep hue that stood in stark contrast to our own pale, almost translucent complexions. We were both redheads, me with my strawberry blonde, my wife with her auburn. Pale, no dark curls, no freckles. Nothing in this fragile new life resembled either of us. I looked from the baby, swaddled securely in the nurse's arms, to my wife, her face a mask of practiced calm. She stared at me, her eyes wide but unreadable. "The hospital must have switched babies," she said, her voice even, almost rehearsed. But something in her gaze, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place, didn't match her placid words. It was a micro-expression, a shift in focus that spoke volumes. My hands shook as I reached out, my fingers brushing against the impossibly soft skin of the child that didn't feel like mine. He was perfect, undeniably beautiful, but a stranger. A beautiful, terrifying stranger. And then the nurse, oblivious to the chasm opening before us, gently placed him in my arms and asked, "Now, Dad, we need you to fill out the birth certificate." The pen felt heavy in my trembling hand. The form, so official, so final, stared back at me. A stark white sheet of paper demanding a paternity I now doubted with every fiber of my being. My wife watched me, her breath catching softly. This was the moment, the inflection point. Should I write his name, a name we'd chosen with such hopeful anticipation, or should I leave it blank? The weight of her gaze pressed down, a silent, unspoken pressure to conform, to accept the narrative she'd woven. But the image of that dark skin, so profoundly different, was seared into my mind. I looked at him again. His tiny fingers curled around my thumb. He was so small, so vulnerable. Yet he held the answer to a question I hadn't even known how to ask until this moment. A question that had taken root the instant I saw him. The nurse cleared her throat. "Sir, we just need the father's name." I paused, the pen hovering over the line. The future, once so clear, now felt like a dense fog. "Now, real quick before we move on, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories just like this. Now let's keep going." She cried most of the night. Soft, muffled sobs that punctuated the sterile quiet of the hospital room. Lying beside me, her body a warm, familiar weight, she kept repeating, "Something is wrong with the system. They must have made a mistake." Her voice was a desperate whisper, laced with a fear that felt manufactured, too rehearsed to be genuine. I rocked in the uncomfortable hospital chair, my gaze fixed on the baby sleeping in the bassinet beside her. He was a dark enigma, a living testament to a truth I was beginning to suspect. The fluorescent lights of the room hummed, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and distort the reality I thought I knew. I tried to comfort her, my hand resting on her shoulder, but her body felt rigid, unresponsive to my touch. Then she turned to me, her eyes swimming with unshed tears. "You know I love you, right?" she blurted out, her voice suddenly raw and vulnerable. It was a question completely out of the blue, a non sequitur that tightened the knot of unease in my stomach. I asked her why she'd say that, why now, and her eyes didn't meet mine. They darted around the room, seeking an escape, an answer that wasn't there. I went into the bathroom, the cool, unforgiving tile a relief against my burning skin. I sat on the floor, the door shut, the sound of her quiet crying a distant echo. I remembered the jokes we used to make, weeks before, about our future ginger baby. The rosy cheeks, the explosion of freckles, the shock of bright red hair. We'd envisioned a miniature version of ourselves, a tangible symbol of our love. My chest felt like it was caving in, a hollowness spreading from my core. Then a flicker of impulse, a desperate need for tangible proof, led me to her bedside table. She was finally asleep, her breathing soft and even. I picked up her phone. That's when I saw the photos. The The screen flared to life, displaying a gallery of images that made my breath hitch. They weren't of our child or of our family. They were intimate, explicit, and they were with another man. One message, a text from him, stood out starkly. She said she missed his taste, said she couldn't wait for him to finish in her again. The words hung in the digital air, a death knell for everything I believed. The photos cascaded across the screen, each one a new stab to the heart. One depicted her, dressed in black lace lingerie, kneeling on what looked like a plush hotel carpet. Her head was bowed, her lips around him, a posture of undeniable surrender. The scene was intimate, private, and utterly devastating to witness. Then the next photo. My vision blurred as I stared at it. She was smiling, her mouth open, and his release was smeared across her face, dripping down her neck. The sheer audacity, the blatant disregard for our vows was staggering. It wasn't just infidelity, it was a public display of private desires, captured for preservation. A video started to autoplay then, triggered by my clumsy touch. The visual was jarring, leaving me feeling like an intruder in my own life. She was on all fours, her body arched, and he was behind her, entering her with a primal rhythm. Her screams of pleasure were louder, more desperate than I remembered hers ever making me. I tried to block it out, to tell myself it wasn't real, but the sounds were undeniable. "Right there," she gasped, her voice thick with abandon. "Don't stop, empty yourself inside me." The words echoed in the small bathroom, a confession that shattered the last vestiges of my denial. That's when I broke. The hotel TV remote, a cheap plastic object, suddenly felt like an extension of my rage. I threw it with all my might, the sharp crack of plastic against the screen echoing through the room. The television's display fractured, a spiderweb of cracks obscuring the image, silencing the sounds of her betrayal. The sudden noise startled the nurse who had been tending to other patients down the hall. She opened my door cautiously, her expression a mixture of concern and surprise, to find me standing there, breathing heavily, the broken remote clutched in my hand. The morning after, the sterile hospital air hung heavy with unspoken accusations. The events of the night before had left me raw, exposed. Yet, I still sought an explanation, a sliver of truth to grasp onto. I asked her again about the baby, my voice hoarse, devoid of its usual warmth. "Sometimes genetics do weird things," she replied, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, her words as distant as the stars. It was a weak defense, a hollow attempt to fill the expanding void between us. I didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, I laid my cards on the table, my voice low and steady, a contrast to the storm raging inside me. "I saw the photos," I said, watching her closely. There were no tears this time, no dramatic outbursts. She simply folded in on herself, her body growing small, like a paper doll creased and neglected. She didn't flinch, didn't deny. The silence was her confession. I needed more. I needed to hear it from her, the confirmation that would seal her fate and mine. Was he, I hesitated, the words catching in my throat, was he the father? Still nothing. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable. I asked again, my voice a little louder, a desperate plea for honesty. "The baby, was he?" Her eyes finally met mine. There was a flicker of something there, a deep, profound sorrow, but it was overshadowed by a chilling resignation. And then she whispered something that would forever be etched into my memory. Her voice was barely audible, a ghostly murmur against the hum of the hospital machines. "He said he wanted to plant something real in me." The words, simple and stark, confirmed everything. The cool, sterile air of the drugstore felt like a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil churning within me. I walked purposefully down the aisle, my mind 1,000 miles away, yet focused on this one, concrete task. I picked up a paternity test, the packaging simple and discreet. It felt profoundly wrong, this cold, clinical step, but necessary. The weight of the small box in my hand was immense, heavier than any object I'd ever held. I returned to the hospital that evening, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the parking lot. She was awake, sitting up in bed, looking paler than ever. When I showed her the test, her eyes widened in a mixture of panic and dismay. "I don't think that's necessary," she stammered, her voice trembling. "We don't need proof." I shook my head, my resolve hardening with every passing moment. "I'm not signing any birth certificate without facts," I stated, my voice flat, unwavering. The words were deliberate, final. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time something was different. The fear of losing me seemed secondary. Her gaze kept drifting to the bassinet, where our son slept, oblivious. She was scared of losing him. I walked over to the crib, the paternity test clutched in one hand. She begged me, her voice cracking, "Please don't do this." But I had already made up my mind. I gently swabbed the baby's mouth, the soft cotton tickling his cheek. He stirred slightly, a tiny whimper escaping his lips. I ignored the ache in my chest, the guilt warring with the need for truth. I placed the swabs in their sterile containers, sealed them, and then placed them inside the prepaid envelope. I'd already mailed it by the time she'd pleaded with me. 3 months earlier. The memory unfolded like a faded photograph, the edges blurred, the colors muted. It was a subtle shift at first, almost imperceptible. She stopped asking me to come to her work events. "They're boring," she'd say with a dismissive wave of her hand, as if my presence at her professional gatherings was a chore. She also stopped bothering with makeup around me, claiming she wanted to be natural, but her social media told a different story. Glamorous selfies, expertly angled and filtered, flooded her feed, snapshots from events I was no longer invited to. One evening, I'd casually asked her about a photo posted online. It was her at a dimly lit restaurant, a glass of wine in front of her, a sophisticated smile on her face. "Your coworker took that, right?" I inquired, trying to keep my tone light. "Yes," she'd replied, her gaze fixed on her phone. "Just a coworker." But a coworker's name kept cropping up as the photographer, a specific person who seemed to have an uncanny knack for capturing her best angles. And this coworker, I noticed, was an avid fan of her online presence, consistently liking every single one of her posts. Then there was the matter of the receipt. I'd been working late one night, coming home to an empty house. Tucked under a magnet on the refrigerator, I found a crumpled receipt from an expensive Italian restaurant. It was from the same night she'd texted me, claiming she was home, feeling unwell, and had spent the evening watching Netflix. The bill was substantial, far more than a solo dinner would warrant. The date on the receipt burned itself into my memory, another piece of a puzzle I was slowly, reluctantly, starting to assemble. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a sense of dread creeping into my gut. I navigated to her company's website, my heart hammering against my ribs. The employee directory was a digital graveyard of my former life. I scrolled through the photos, searching for familiar faces, for any clue that might confirm my growing suspicions. Then I found it. A team photo, smiling faces plastered across the screen. My fist clenched before I even consciously registered the movement. There he was, the man from her social media, tall, with a confident, almost cocky smile that exuded an aura of undeniable charisma. And the baby. In the hospital, amidst the sterile white of the birthing room, I had been struck by the baby's smile. A gummy, infant expression that nonetheless held a trace of this man's inherent self-assurance. The same smile, I now realized with a sickening lurch, was present in this team photo. A cold dread washed over me. I needed more. I needed to connect the dots to see if my terrifying intuition held any weight. My next search made my stomach twist into knots. I pulled up his LinkedIn profile. The address listed for his company was the same building I used to work in, the same floor. For 2 years, our shifts had overlapped. 2 years of proximity, of shared air, of unaware entanglement. The man who had become a ghost in my marriage, a phantom presence in my home, had been working just floors away. The realization was a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. The carefully constructed reality of our marriage crumbled around me, leaving only the jagged pieces of betrayal. Her password management was a testament to years of habit, a comforting predictability that now felt like a gaping vulnerability. I tried the one she'd used for years, a simple phrase tied to a significant date. It worked. Her laptop sprang to life, revealing an inbox flooded with thousands of unread messages, a digital testament to a life I hadn't fully known, but I wasn't interested in the bulk of it. My search was targeted, precise. I typed his name into the search bar, my fingers flying across the keys, a grim determination settling over me. Over 40 threads appeared, a dense forest of digital communication. My eyes scanned the subject lines, each one a fresh wound. Hotel confirmations, photos of lingerie, the evidence mounted, undeniable and damning. One message, sent from her personal email, simply read, "You make me feel things I never felt with him." Another, more damning, followed, "I love how deep you go, how full you make me." I wanted to scream, to shatter the screen with my bare hands, but a chilling curiosity held me captive. I scrolled further, my breath catching in my throat, and then I saw it, an ultrasound photo sent from her work email. It wasn't our home scan, the one we'd celebrated with champagne. This was clearly a different date, a different context. The image, grainy and indistinct, was nonetheless a definitive marker, a crossroads. The implications were terrifyingly clear. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. This was a planned, calculated deception, spanning months, perhaps even longer. A secret life lived parallel to the one we shared. My hands trembled as I navigated through her saved files. A folder, simple and unassuming, caught my eye. "Daddy?" The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. With a heavy sigh, I clicked. The contents of the folder were a series of dozens of recordings, audio files, each one a testament to her betrayal, a symphony of lies. I clicked on one at random. Her voice, laced with moans, filled the room. She was on a couch, her legs in the air, whispering his name, her body lost to pleasure. Another file played, her voice laced with a different sort of intensity. "That's it," she purred, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "I want to feel you explode in me again." A deep male voice, his voice, replied, "You're going to carry mine. You know that, right?" The words hit me like a physical blow. She was pregnant, with his child. I closed the laptop with shaking hands, the screen going dark, but the images and sounds were burned into my mind. My knees felt weak, my body suddenly heavy. I never called her that name, the one she moaned like it was something sacred. The implications were staggering. She was carrying his child. Our shared life, our dreams, our future, all built on a foundation of deception. The tenderness I'd felt for her, the love I'd believed was reciprocal, now felt like a cruel joke. Each recording was a nail in the coffin of our marriage, a reminder of the secrets she'd kept, the life she'd lived behind my back. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart. The envelope felt unnervingly light as I parked the car outside the hospital. The paternity test results. I held it in my hand, the thick cardstock a stark contrast to the flimsy nature of my hopes. I drove around the block twice, the familiar streets of our neighborhood offering no comfort. Finally, I pulled into a secluded spot, the engine idling, the silence amplifying my own internal turmoil. I opened the envelope. The verdict was clear, stark, and unavoidable. 0% probability. My son, not mine. I didn't cry, I didn't rage. Those reactions felt too easy, too performative. Something inside me just went silent, a quiet numbness that settled deep into my bones. I walked up to the baby's crib, my movements slow, deliberate. He stirred as I approached, his tiny fists waving in the air. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small piece of tape. With steady hands, I carefully taped the printed results next to his name tag, a silent, damning declaration. She noticed me, her eyes widening with a dawning horror. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice a whisper. I didn't say a word. I simply turned and stared at her, my gaze unwavering, locking onto hers for what felt like an eternity. I wanted her to feel the weight of my knowledge, the crushing certainty of her deception. I held her gaze until she looked away, a flicker of shame finally crossing her face. Then I turned and walked out of the room. But I knew with absolute certainty that I wasn't done yet. This was only the beginning. The sterile, impersonal interface of the online banking portal felt like a familiar enemy. With focused intent, I navigated through the menus, my fingers tapping out commands with practiced efficiency. I drained our joint account, every last penny transferred into a new account, opened just that morning, bearing only my name. It felt like a surgical strike, a clean, calculated severing of financial ties. The money represented our shared life, our future, everything we had painstakingly built together, and it was now mine alone. Next, the mortgage. I initiated the process, signing off on the paperwork that would sever our shared ownership of the home we'd once dreamed of raising a family in. The house, once a symbol of our stability, now felt like a monument to her lies. I called the lawyer the same night, outlining my intentions, my voice devoid of emotion. I wasn't going to let her use a dime of what we built, not while she was playing mommy to someone else's kid. My phone buzzed incessantly, a swarm of notifications. Her mom, her friends, a barrage of worried, confused, and angry messages. Then one voice message stood out from the cacophony. It wasn't her. It was him, the coworker, the father of my son. I hesitated before pressing play, a knot of dread tightening in my chest. His message made my own chest cave in, a physical sensation of being punched in the gut. His laughter, a deep, booming sound that seemed to mock my pain, was the first thing I heard. "Sorry it had to be this way, bro," he said, his tone deceptively casual, as if we were commiserating over a missed sports game. "I didn't mean to take something from you, but she begged for it every night." The words were laced with a cruel possessiveness, a perverse sense of entitlement. He continued, his voice dropping to a more sinister register. "Get your head checked. The baby looks nothing like you, and she never loved you. You were just steady. I gave her a storm." That's when my vision blurred, the audio distortion mirroring my own internal breakdown. I replayed that last line. I gave her a storm 15 times, each repetition a fresh wave of agony. I could hear her voice echoing his in my head, a twisted duet of moans and betrayal. It was a haunting lullaby of lies, a soundtrack to the destruction of my life. The steady, dependable man he'd called me was a fool. I had been a placeholder, a comfortable convenience, while she sought a storm, a tempest with him. The contrast he painted between us was brutal and devastatingly accurate. The storm he described was a hurricane, a destructive force that had swept away everything I held dear. My sense of self, my trust, my very identity, all reduced to rubble. I felt a primal urge to lash out, to confront him, to make him feel a fraction of the pain he had inflicted. But I knew, in that moment, that physical retaliation would be empty. The true revenge would be far more calculated, far more devastating. The storm he had gifted her was about to be unleashed upon them both. The phone call to her mother was the hardest bridge to burn. Her voice, once warm and inviting, now sounded brittle, fragile. "Mom," I began, my voice thick with unshed tears, "I need to tell you something." I laid it all out, piece by agonizing piece. The baby's true paternity, the photos, the deceit, the recordings. I sent screenshots, audio messages, the damning DNA results. Her mother's initial confusion quickly turned to horror, then to sobs. Her voice cracked as she confessed, "I knew something was off. I saw her sneaking out at night when I came to visit. Her father joined the call, his booming voice usually a source of comfort, now laced with a chilling silence. He didn't say a word, just listened, his presence a heavy weight on the line. After a long, drawn-out pause, he hung up. I braced myself for anger, for accusations, but instead, my phone pinged with a single text message from him. It contained just 3 words: "Thank you for being honest." The unexpected gratitude was a strange balm, a small flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness. It confirmed that at least one parent understood the necessity of truth, no matter how painful. Her mother's sobs continued, interspersed with apologies for not seeing it sooner, for trusting her daughter implicitly. She spoke of how proud she had been of our family, of our plans. Each word was a lament for a future that would never be. The devastation in her voice was a mirror of my own, amplified by a mother's unique pain. The revelation had fractured her family too, leaving a trail of broken hearts in its wake. The boxes were stacked neatly in the hallway, each one a silent accusation. I carried them out of the house, the familiar walls of our home seeming to mock me with their memories of shared laughter and whispered promises. I drove them to her office, leaving the weighty cardboard containers on the sidewalk outside the imposing glass doors. On top of the uppermost box, I placed a printout of the DNA test results, his dark skin stark against the white paper. I wanted no doubt, no ambiguity. Her coworkers, some of whom I recognized from office parties we'd attended together, peered out from behind their desks, their faces a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Security guards were called, a futile attempt to contain the unfolding drama. The phone in my pocket buzzed incessantly as her floor was alerted to the spectacle below. I didn't care. I wanted every corner of her life scorched with the truth she had so carefully buried. Every brick of the edifice she had built on lies had to crumble. Then, I packed my own things, the few remnants of my life that still felt like mine. My clothes, my books, my memories. I loaded them into my car and drove, 2 states away, a new horizon, a chance to disappear. But I kept one photo in my glove compartment, a faded image of us, freshman year of college. We were young then, full of dreams, our futures unwritten, our love seemingly unshakable. A stark reminder of who we were before the storm. I hadn't known he had a girlfriend. The thought that he, too, was being deceived, that my torment was shared, brought a strange, grim satisfaction. Her message, however, arrived with a torrent of proof. Screenshots from the same hotel nights I'd found on my wife's phone. Texts exchanged between them, littered with the same intimate language, the same coded desires. One of his messages to her read with chilling clarity: "I'm just using her. She's a dumb redhead. You're the one I want." The words were a double-edged sword, confirming my wife's betrayal while simultaneously revealing the depths of his own duplicity. Her offer came through the encrypted messaging app we'd both downloaded, a tool for clandestine communication. "Do you want revenge too?" she asked, her words sharp and to the point. "He deserves to be broken, and so does she." Her voice when she called was a low growl, a predator's hunger for retribution. She wanted them both to suffer, to experience the same wreckage she had endured. I listened, my own desire for vengeance momentarily overshadowed by a new, shared purpose. I agreed. Vengeance, I realized, could be a powerful unifier. I asked her for one thing, a crucial element for the plan that was beginning to form in my mind. "Your permission," I said, my voice steady, "to post everything." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for a beat, then her voice, firm and resolute, came back. "Yes, post it all." The pact was sealed, 2 wounded souls forging an alliance against their betrayers. The digital storm was about to break. Armed with the evidence, both mine and hers, I uploaded everything. Their photos, intimate and compromising. Videos, heavily redacted but undeniably explicit. the entire contents of the daddy folder, a testament to her secret life. I created a new username, a digital ghost, and posted it all to a community board for our condo building, a place where their neighbors, their friends, their acquaintances would see. I emailed it to their HR departments, a digital hammer blow to their professional lives. I sent it directly to her father, a final, crushing blow to his faith in his daughter. The fallout was immediate and devastating. A week later, my phone rang over 30 times. Her voice, cracking with panic, pleaded with me to take it down. She was fired. His life imploded as well. His girlfriend, armed with our shared evidence, dumped him immediately. The only thing she had left, the sole tangible connection to the life she had so carelessly dismantled, was a baby with my last name. But he was not my blood. He was a constant, living reminder of everything that had been lost. The retribution was swift and absolute. Their carefully constructed lives lay in ruins, exposed for all to see. The storm I had promised was in full effect, the consequences of their actions raining down upon them. I watched from a distance, a silent observer of the wreckage, a grim satisfaction settling in my gut. The pain they had inflicted was being returned tenfold. The divorce papers arrived with no accompanying note, no explanation, no plea for understanding. Just the stark, legal documents, stark white against the mundane backdrop of my new life. Taped to the top of the stack was a sticky note. 3 simple words in my wife's familiar handwriting. I know everything. My lawyer, a seasoned professional who'd seen his fair share of infidelity cases, called me after she'd signed. She said my wife had cried when she signed. Said she'd begged her to ask me to send her a voice message, anything. Apparently, she'd managed to coax the lawyer into recording her. The message came through a secure channel, a single audio file. In it, her voice, choked with emotion, apologized. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I was lonely. You worked too much. I never meant for the baby to not be mine." The silence between her words, the ragged breaths, the broken pauses, were louder than any apology she could possibly utter. She still hadn't admitted who the father was, but I no longer needed her to. The evidence was overwhelming, the truth undeniable. Her confession, however veiled, was in the very air she'd breathed during her broken speech. The legal proceedings were swift and brutal. She signed away her claims to the assets, her protests of unfairness falling on deaf ears. The evidence I had presented was irrefutable, a digital monument to her deceit. My lawyer confirmed that she had been devastated by the public exposure, the professional repercussions, and the loss of her marriage. Yet, in her apology, she still hadn't fully owned her actions, her focus shifting to my perceived absence rather than her own choices. She tried to reach out through mutual friends, a desperate attempt to mend the irreparable. Her messages, filtered through intermediaries, spoke of wanting to tell me something important. She wanted me to know she still loved the child, that she had named him after me, a twisted homage to the life she had destroyed. She desperately hoped, her messages conveyed, that one day I could forgive her. Her friend, perhaps trying to gauge my reaction, sent me photos of the baby's room. The walls were covered in pictures of me. Old photos, new photos, a shrine built on a foundation of guilt. It was a haunting spectacle. Every corner of the room was a testament to a life I no longer inhabited, a family that no longer existed. But what haunted me more than the resemblance the child shared with the coworker, a dark-skinned echo of his father, was something else. Something far more disturbing. Underneath my name, scrawled in glittering pink letters, were the words "Daddy," a lie dressed in craft glue, an attempt to rewrite reality with glitter. The sheer audacity of it all was breathtaking. To try and reclaim a title she had so utterly forfeited, to adorn the room with a false narrative. It was a desperate, pathetic charade, a final act of denial. The memory of that glittery inscription became a recurring nightmare, a symbol of the profound deception that had defined our relationship. It was a lie that shimmered, a truth buried beneath a superficial sparkle. She retreated for a time into the digital ether. Then she resurfaced, a phoenix rising from the ashes of her own making, but with wings of deceit. She posted a long, tear-jerking statement on social media, a carefully crafted narrative of loss and victimhood. She'd lost everything, of course, her marriage, her reputation, her home. But the tears in her photo were staged, the sorrow a performance. People knew, though. The comments section quickly became a battlefield of truth, flooded with screenshots from the folder, with snarky replies that cut through her fabricated woe. One comment, stark and honest, cut through the noise. "You deserve to be alone." Her profile slowly went silent, the digital space she occupied falling into an eerie quiet. Months passed, bringing with them a semblance of peace, a distance from the wreckage. Then a letter arrived. It was from her, her familiar handwriting a jolt from the past. She wrote that she missed me, that he, the coworker, the storm she'd craved, had never stayed. She was raising their child alone, a solitary figure in the ruins of her choices. And every time the baby looked at her, she saw the face of the man who had left her. The irony wasn't lost on me. The storm she had sought had passed, leaving behind only emptiness and the lingering ache of regret. She had chased a fleeting passion, only to find herself alone with the consequences. The face of the man who left her was my face, the face of the man she had betrayed, the man whose name she had falsely inscribed on her child's bedroom wall. It was a bitter, deserved solitude. The hospital. Months later, I found myself drawn back to the place where my life had fractured. The same smell of antiseptic and sterile linoleum hung in the air, the same long, echoing hallway. I walked past the room she had occupied, the room where our son had been born, the room where our future had been irrevocably altered. A new couple was there now, their faces lit with expectant joy, a stark reminder of the beginnings I had lost. I approached the nurse's station, a familiar yet alien landscape. I left a note with the nurse, a simple 3-word message for her to pass along. "I know now." As I sat in my car, the engine humming softly, I remembered her lying in that hospital bed, her eyes steady as she swore the baby was ours. The conviction in her voice had almost swayed me, had almost allowed me to believe the lie. But the truth, as it always does, had surfaced. It was never really about the baby, was it? Not entirely. It was about who she became when I wasn't looking, the stranger who emerged from the shadows of our marriage. It was about the ease with which she embraced that stranger, the speed with which she allowed that other life to consume her, and how far she'd fallen without blinking. The baby was a consequence, a tangible symbol of her choices, but the true betrayal lay in her transformation, in the person she had revealed herself to be. The memory of her deception was a scar that would never fully fade, a constant reminder of the man I had been and the woman I had loved. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story from us. We'll see you in the next one.